What's the best example of a smart person being incredibly stupid you've ever experienced? Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to the Vancher channel. Also, please share your thoughts on this video in the comments. Let's get started. Story 1. Oh, I almost forgot about this one. When I was in my final year of physics at university, we had a professor who would get very irritated at the pull string for the projection screen, as it would dangle down in front of the whiteboard. Every morning, he would spend a good couple minutes attempting to throw the weight on the end over the light fixture above the whiteboard, taking anywhere from 5 to 30 tries each time. All the students would give tips and encouragement, and this became a kind of inside joke for the class of how long it would take every morning. Months go by, and one day, near the end of the quarter, we end up with a substitute. The sub goes to the board and, without hesitation, grabs the string and hooks it over a thumbtack stuck in the cork at the top of the whiteboard. The entire class literally gasped in unison. The sub whirled around asking what happened, and the whole class just starts laughing. Eventually, someone explained what happened, and we all had a good laugh that an entire class of physics majors never even thought of that solution, let alone noticed that the tack had always been there for that purpose. Answer: a biology teacher in college. Absolutely brilliant, working with molecular diagnosis of HPV. Watching her try and fail to turn the projector on for several minutes was so fun. Sometimes she even gave up and decided to just use the board. She can't draw to save her life. Best teacher I had in college. I hope she's doing well, fighting God with an HDMI cable. I haven't heard from her in years. This perfectly illustrates that intelligence and logic do not always save the day in everyday situations. Physicists can calculate the trajectory of a satellite, but fail to notice a button or a nail right in front of their eyes. And there is something very human about this. We get used to the usual way of solving a problem and do not even look for a simple solution. Story 2. Our physics professor once had held a remote lecture without turning his Google Meet on, so he just spoke to the computer for 1.5 hours. Story 3. One of my best friends, who is now a surgeon, and one of the smartest people I have ever met. During his first year of med school, he was visiting his hometown during a break in the semester. We were at a restaurant catching up. He ordered a milkshake for dessert that came with a maraschino cherry on top. He excitedly ate it, then said something to the effect of, "Man, I love maraschino cherries. I could eat 1,000,000 of these. I always wanted to buy a jar and eat it all to myself." To which I replied with, "John, you're 24 years old. You own a house, have money in the bank, and are in med school. You're an adult. If you want to get yourself a jar of maraschino cherries, you can. We can hit up the store as soon as we're done here." He spent about 5 minutes struggling to process this newfound information. You could almost see the gears in his head turning. After this brief delay, he looked at me with the biggest, almost childlike smile and said, "Let's go now." We paid our bill, then headed to the nearest grocery store. John purchased the largest jar of maraschino cherries available and started eating. Afterwards, we went to a house party where John refused to drink, but instead just kept eating from his jar. Long story short, he ate the entire jar in about 1 hour. 15 minutes later, he started puking neon red cherries for the rest of the evening. Answer: I had a similar experience when I mentioned to someone that I can make much better mozzarella sticks at home, and we don't need to go to a restaurant that makes really crappy ones, as she was craving fried food, and she just couldn't compute that it's possible to make certain foods at home that she associated with restaurants. She was like 19 and her family didn't really cook, and she just lived off of junk and boxed food and takeout in the college meal plan. Here's a classic example. A person may be a future surgeon, saving lives, owning a house, but at the same time not being able to come to the simplest conclusion, that they are already an adult and can buy themselves a jar of cherries. And this, by the way, is very human. We often live with some kind of childhood dreams that seem unattainable, when in fact they can be fulfilled by going to the nearest supermarket. Story 4. I used to work at a chemical engineering plant. One day I was in the kitchen washing my glasses with a drop of dish soap, and one of the lead engineers said I shouldn't wash my glasses like that. I asked him why not, and he responded that I will wash the prescription off. Story 5. Buddy of mine was in med school on a surgery rotation. He's in the OR, handed a razor by the senior resident, and told to shave the patient as part of prep for surgery. Totally normal and common med student task. He starts shaving away at the guy's chest. The way he tells it, this patient was really hairy, so he had to go clean off the razor multiple times. He's trying to do a thorough job. Gets half of the guy's chest done when the senior resident wanders back over. Turns out the surgery was for an appendectomy, and he was supposed to shave his fudge stomach. That poor guy woke up from surgery very fudge confused about why half his chest hair was gone. And my friend got made fun of every day for the rest of his rotation. Story 6. I'm a pharmacist. I have worked with fellow pharmacists who did not know that lesbians menstruate. Women usually do not produce breast milk until after they have given birth. Jehovah's Witnesses do not believe in blood transfusions. Story 7. I worked IT at a university. We got a call saying a printer would not turn on. The particular person who called was a very stereotypical, I have a doctorate, I know all the things kind of person. Anyway, I get to the classroom and they show me the printer proclaiming they checked everything including the power strip, unplugged it, plugged it back in and all that. They were very irate and rude the whole time I was there. While I was looking it over, they were getting more upset because they had already checked the power cables and they were fine. Without saying anything, I unplugged the power strip from itself, plugged it into the wall, then turned on the printer and just walked out. Answer. The particular person who called was a very stereotypical, I have a doctorate, I know all the things kind of person. Reminds me of the old joke of two engineers trying to measure the height of a long pole. One tried to climb up it with a measuring tape but could not do it. Then the other suggests they use trigonometry, making a right angle, but they realized that would not account for the part buried in the ground. A technician walked by and asked what they were doing. Upon hearing it, he pulled the pole off and laid it on the ground, measured it, gave them the number, put the pole back in its place and went on with his day. The engineers looked at each other in disbelief. Fudge technicians. So typical. You ask them the height, they give you the length. This perfectly illustrates the difference between academic and practical minds. A person may know quantum mechanics, but lose the battle with an extension cord. And the funny thing is, the more confident he was in his own righteousness, the more impressive it looked when you just plugged the cord into the wall and walked away. Story 8. My brother-in-law had a master's degree in physics and maths. He was a teacher at a high school. He had a new house built. He thought he would save money by nailing on the drywall, sheetrock, gibboard. He managed to put nails through a hot water pipe in the wiring. By the time he'd paid a plumber and electrician to fix up the mess, it cost a lot more. Later in life, he fell off a ladder and died. Story 9. My sister has been driving her BF's truck for a year. We get in the truck to go somewhere. She says, wait, I need to go in the house to get a paper towel to dry off the windshield. I say, why don't you use the wipers? She says, I don't know how. I ask, what do you do when it rains? Answer, I stay home. Story 10. Not mine, but related to me by my boss about 25 years ago. She was friends with a husband and wife who were brilliant academics, highly regarded with research positions at one of the top universities in the country. The couple wanted to have children, but their natural biology compatibility said, nuh-uh, not gonna happen, and they decided to adopt instead, from a foreign country as very few babies are put up for adoption within Australia. The arrangements were that the baby would be flown in with a caregiver and handed over at the airport. All went as planned, no worries. Later that night, my boss received a call from the distraught academic husband, Louise, name changed of course. The baby is crying, and we can't get her to stop. We think she's hungry, but she's not taking the bottle. The adopting agency had given them a few basics just in case, one of which being a tin of baby formula. You're a mother. Can you come over and maybe help sort out what the problem is? Of course, replies Louise, and is there within 15 minutes. This being a fairly small city on international scales, the wife rushes up when she knocks on the door and escorts her to where the baby is indeed crying like there's no tomorrow, and has been for hours. Nappy is dry. Nothing else is obviously wrong. She probably is hungry. Show me how you've been trying to feed her, Louise asks, and the couple comply. Louise observes their process and makes one suggestion. You're actually supposed to mix the powder with water before trying to feed it to the baby. Perfectly illustrates that intelligence in one area does not guarantee skills in another. People can be geniuses in the laboratory, write scientific articles, understand the most complex theories, but at the same time, not know that baby food needs to be diluted with water. And there is something very touching about this. They wanted to be perfect parents, but were confronted with the simplest reality, which you usually learn not from books, but from experience. Story 11. My father-in-law is very intelligent. He taught himself how to solve a Rubik's Cube without looking anything up and is generally a genius in math, logic, puzzles, what have you. He believes dinosaurs couldn't be real because they would be too big for their skeletons to uphold their weight. He has lots of other really stupid ideas because he is so intelligent, he thinks he can just reason himself into correct conclusions without doing research or adhering to the scientific process. Story 12. I knew a girl studying medicine. We were talking about planes and how they work. She asked me where the engine is, and I said, you know those big spinny things? She said, oh, I thought those were to blow the clouds away. Story 13. My doctor. During the period of my life in which I was dating my ex-G, my doctor would insist every time I saw him that I needed to be on birth control because it was responsible to be preventing pregnancy. No matter how many times I told him that I was in a monogamous relationship with a woman, he would still keep asking. I guess it just didn't compute. Answer. I know it's tedious, but they have to ask. I have been asked many times, birth control, and been snarky and replied, I am a lesbian, with arms flailing around. But then as I got older, I just said, no pregnant, no intimacy. I will pee in the jar. It's too much effort to try and convince them otherwise. Plus, they give you something, and you happen to be pregnant for whatever reason. It's a no-win situation. Edit, a word. Story 14. I've been waiting so long to tell this story. 2 members of my family are very highly intelligent, so I always thought. I go to their house and they just installed an above-ground pool that came with a pool cover. Instead of using the pool cover, they went and bought all these insulated pink foam boards, 1 in thick, 4 by 8 foot rectangle foam boards. I just sat there and watched while they cut up all the foam into like puzzle pieces to fit in that round pool. I asked them why, and they said it was to keep leaves out of the pool. So every time they got in the pool, they had to remove all the puzzle pieces, then clean the pool because tiny pink insulation was floating on top. And when they were finished for the day, spend an hour trying to connect all the puzzle pieces they cut back into the pool. The original pool cover was by the pool in the bag it came in. The dumbest thing I've ever witnessed in my life. X2B, edited to add. I misread a comment below. They knew it came with a pool cover. They decided for some reason that they didn't want to use it. I didn't ask why. Just let them do what they do. Answer. Do they live in a temperate climate? My thinking is maybe they were concerned about the cover not being an adequate insulator and wanted to use something that would either help the pool hold heat if it were cooler outside. Maybe the hassle of fitting the puzzle together was worth the heating-cooling cost savings. I am just grasping at straws, though, trying to think of why an intelligent couple would do this. Sometimes people turn a simple task into an epic undertaking. You have a pool. You have a ready-made cover. Just take it and use it. But no, why take the easy way out when you can conduct an engineering experiment? Buy a bunch of foam, cut it into puzzle pieces, assemble and disassemble this structure every time, and then clean the water of pink crumbs. This is no longer a pool, but some kind of art project, an installation about meaningless labor. And the funny thing is that the solution was right there all along, in a sealed bag. Sometimes we get so caught up in reinventing the wheel that we don't even notice that it's already sitting in our garage. Story 15. University physics professor at a Hyundai dealership, arguing with a tech telling him about the noise in his car. The professor was freaking out, saying he couldn't even understand what the tech was trying to say, because the tech said centrifugal force instead of centripetal force. The conversation could not move forward. It was weird. Answer. That's dumb that he wouldn't know what the guy is talking about, but he's not wrong. Centrifugal force is not really a force. It's just the sensation of being pulled outward when changing directions, like when your car is moving at a high rate of speed through a corner. Centripetal force is an actual force that pulls inward, like a ball on a string or a planet orbiting the sun. Story 16. Well, my cousin, who has 2 fudge master's degrees in finance and economics, put his hand in still spinning lawnmower to help it blow out rest of grass faster. He lost a finger. I asked why he didn't wait till it stopped completely. He said it was just in a hurry. Story 17. Very early in my career, I was tasked with an industrial engineering project on improving efficiency on a high-volume product line. I guarantee you've seen the product. First, during a current state analysis, I determined that the company was losing around 0.08 per part shipped. We sold them for 0.29 each. That's not good, especially when you're producing millions of these things each month. I presented this to the executive management team. One of the VPs cut me off mid-sentence and said, Nonsense. We make it up in volume. Story 18. My father-in-law could construct a new bladder out of a piece of your own intestinal lining if you had bladder cancer and needed a new one. He saved thousands of lives that otherwise would have been lost to renal, prostate, and urinary tract diseases. He once told me that someone with a bright yellow car was intentionally hitting his Mercedes-Benz. They'd hit his car and sideswiped it once while he was at the hospital. He had it fixed. It cost thousands of dollars. Then a few weeks later, the same bright yellow vehicle did it again, this time nearly tearing off his fender and leaving a huge yellow gouge down the side of his car. He took it to the body shop a second time. His next time visiting the hospital, the parking attendant said, "Hey doc, it's nice to see you, but I have to warn you, security was here and they're kind of upset about the fire hydrant you've hit twice in the last month. I tried covering for you, but apparently they've got it on video." Story 19. One of my closest guy friends is a chemistry major with a 3.9 GPA, but bought a fake ID that said he was younger than he actually was. Story 20. My brother is very intelligent. He lived at home when attending college. Most days he'd take the bus. Sometimes if my mom didn't need her car, he would be allowed to drive it to school. Multiple times he drove the car to school, forgot, and took the bus home. Answer: that just happens if you have a hard routine and it's disrupted. Once time, my work schedule changed and I started an hour later, so I went and got Starbucks first. But this did something to my brain, and the muscle memory of typing the BitLocker pin on my work PC to get to the login was erased or was attached to being at work at that time and couldn't be referenced. So I had to get that pin changed. I'm not smart though, so I guess this is off topic. Story 21. Because we only eat ham once a year, at Thanksgiving with the turkey, and the two are packaged the almost same way, I've always thought ham was also a type of bird. No one corrected me until last year, when I was 20. Story 22. One time, I was at my friend Claudio's apartment with his brother, just hanging out and watching a movie. All of a sudden, I hear a whoosh and see a big flash of light. I look over at Claude and his hair is on fire. We get it out quickly, and I asked him what the hell just happened. He told me, "I was trying to listen to the sound the lighter made when I flicked it." We were completely sober at the time. Story 23. In college, the smartest person I have ever met was arrested for urinating in public less than 100 yards from his residence. Story 24. I work at a physics lab. Just because someone is a certified genius doesn't mean they don't lack common sense. Story 25. I knew this girl in high school. She took AP classes with me. She definitely belonged in them. I did not. Couple years after we graduate, my best friend got invited by her to talk with her financial advisors to help build and plan his finances. Turns out they weren't financial advisors at all. They were all part of an MLM scheme and tried to rope my friend in. He told me he doesn't think she understood what the situation was, and he just stopped talking to her after that. Some people just don't have street smarts. Answer: here's one for you. I met that type of scammer. They offered me this plan where I give them money, they grow the money, then I can borrow from it when I get older. I kept asking, when does the investment mature? And so when do I get the money back? And all kinds of questions trying to understand how this works. The guy just explained the same thing over and over again. I wasn't going to go into it until I knew when I would get my money back, and managed to waste an hour of this jerk's time. Now here's where I'm the idiot. I asked for it to be re-explained over and over again because I don't see the benefit. Could you go over it again? If I had been smarter, I would have seen that it was a scam like my dad did. Story 26. So growing up, I used to think I was a once-in-a-lifetime genius. And to be honest, my school's low standards helped. I realized that I was not when I met a real one my freshman year of college. Guy was 18 and studied physics at a pretty advanced level, composed music and played piano incredibly, and was writing a novel. Thing is, he was 18 and not quite mature enough for college. He never went to class because he thought he didn't need to, and once Skyrim came out, he never left his dorm anymore. Smartest person I had ever met before or since, and he failed out of college his first semester. Story 27. Friend's son with multiple engineering degrees, including electrical, tried to convince us that power lines are DC current. Story 28. I know an A student who would always make the worst life decisions, including trying to rob a store by pointing a gun at his own head. Story 29. When I was in law school, I volunteered for a major, prestigious event. I was in the lobby, verifying registrants and giving them their placards with a colleague. The doors were push, clearly stated. I saw so many people try to repeatedly pull and pull to open. Once they got in, we got them sorted, so we knew exactly who these defeated by door, highly educated people were. Story 30. I was sat in an auction for a pub with a mate. We had gone as interested parties but had decided not to buy. Bidding was slow and then picked up at $240K and going up $5K a bid when he leant forward and said to me, "Watch me cost this guy $5K," and put his hand up. No one moved. It went quiet as everyone looked as a new bid was put in. My mate is a smart fella, but that was dumb, and 4 years on he is still trying to sell the building. Story 31. My sister is such a smart and amazing person, but she also thought north is always the direction you're facing. Story 32. One guy I went to school with said that English is the true language of God because the Bible is written in English. Story 33. He'll use myself. I have skipped 3 grades, told I was gifted, all that jazz. Yesterday I looked at a streetlight for at least 10 solid minutes thinking, geez, the moon is orange tonight. I was sober. Story 34. I believe I'm smart, yet I managed to cut my own cornea with an empty garbage bag. Ophthalmologist had a good laugh. Answer. I did this, but with those spiky, stretchy headband things from the 90s that are somehow making a comeback now. Went to put it on, lost my grip, poked in eye. I have never, ever been humbled so quickly and so severely. Also spent a good few hours one time thinking my key fob for my car was broken because it wouldn't unlock my doors. I was pressing the wrong button. I've had this car for 8 years. Send help. Story 35. My math teacher in high school. She scolded me for Xeroxing my hand for fun because she believed I would get radiation poisoning. Story 36. A guy I used to work with, softly spoken but extremely insightful. He had a knack of understanding a situation and drilling down to the core of the issue. One very snowy day in winter, he decided to drive his motorbike to work. His reasoning was the roads would be full of slow-moving cars, and he'd be able to scoot past them on his bike. What actually happened was he found himself struggling to keep his bike upright, with a lorry just inches behind him. He said, one slip, and he'd have been under that lorry. He drove his 4x4 into work the next day. Lesson learned. Answer. My brother did something similar. He drove his bike to work, and then it snowed a bunch during the day. I knew he did, so I called and offered, emphatically, that I could pick him up in my car, but he flat out refused. He slid out on the first corner and, even then, didn't call for a ride. He ended up fine and made it home, but I was so frustrated when he told me. Story 37. I was dating a girl way back in the day who could speak 6 languages fluently. Asked her to empty what was left in the coffee pot, about half a pot, and she dumped it in my trash can, then immediately said, "Why the hell did I just do that?" Story 38. Not incredibly stupid, but surprisingly. I have found myself working for many engineers, and unless you have a PhD, they are 100% sure they are smarter than you. Reality is that they are great at planning logistics, but usually jerk at fixing problems. But they never see it because they are so confident. Just today, I had to explain to an engineer that the reason his level said that a shelf was out of level was because the wall wasn't level, and he wasn't setting the level square on the shelf. So it was level from side to side, but not front to back. And he had me drive all the way out to the site to show him how to operate a level. This took 45 minutes. He was convinced that he could see it. Next, his level was broken. Then my level was broken. Then he couldn't see it, so it must be level. Magic. Story 39. Was really surprised. I work with another IT guy, but he's way more experienced and smarter than me and can fix complex problems pretty quickly. But we were on a train once, and he said that the cell phone signals were bad on the train because they travel at the speed of sound. Yikes. Story 40. I don't know if I count as smart, but I did a very dumb thing a few years ago. I just bought my first bike with a disc brake. Cycling to work, I thought, I bet disc brakes get really hot. There's a lot of energy being dissipated in rather a small bit of metal. 10 milliseconds, 100 kilograms, maybe, 5 kJ. But the heat would depend on the cooling rate, and they are thin and in a 10 milliseconds airstream. I wonder how hot they get. At the next lights, I bent down and applied my thumb to the disc to check. Sizzle, arg, even stupider. I'd bought a phone with fingerprint unlock a week before, and with the ridges burnt off my thumb, I could no longer unlock my phone. Sigh. They grew back in a week or two, and I could unlock again, interestingly. Story 41. I have a friend who is a straight A student and always overachieves on work. I had to explain to that same friend once that Albert Einstein was not from the 14th century Renaissance. Story 42. A friend of my dad's was a brilliant scientist but terrible businessman. He focused on chemical patents in the 60s, 70s, had Fortune 100 suitors, but he wasn't ready yet, just a few more patents. I think he was up to 160. In the end, he waited too long, or maybe just kept wanting more patents. Anyway, died alone and penniless in public housing. I suspect he had a mental axe to grind. His larger family was extremely wealthy before World War II, but lost virtually everything and had more bad luck since. Story 43. I do IT support for a bunch of scientists and doctors. I see them be complete fudge idiots about technology every day. Answer. I work for accountants and they are the worst. I had one who had a law degree and his CPA. Couldn't manage to enter his own expenses ever. And our system just made you scan in receipts and it allocated everything. I had to walk him through it every month. Once he got super mad at the copier because it would not do anything he wanted. The power was off. Story 44. Me. I was applying to Cambridge Imperial. For the Americans, this is like Harvard, MIT. And over that summer, stayed with some old family friends for the first time in many years, for a wedding. They had one of those plastic clip thingies you use to hold groceries closed. Bread, packs of nuts, that sort of thing. I had never used or seen one, somehow. I could not for the life of me figure out the mechanism to clip it. I kept trying to put it on vertically instead of horizontally, i.e. as a perpendicular bisector to the top of the bag, instead of aligned along the top of the bag. This went on for a good 60 seconds. The family friend's son, who I used to go to school with, just started laughing, said, "Pass it here, Cambridge boy," and clipped the bag. I laughed and laugh now, but Jesus Christ, did I have a quiet mental breakdown about my total and complete lack of basic common sense. XD. Bonus. Beyond that, the following year I did go to Imperial. I met a lot of students there who were even worse than me when it came to practical common sense, most notably including one to whom I had to explain why the microwave was sparking when they put butter, still in the metal foil, inside. Everyone's dumb deep down inside. Smile. Story 45. I knew a guy in high school who had a perfect 1600 SAT score. He was not socially weird, awkward, stunted, and was just a genuinely cool, normal guy. He was a grade level above me, so I didn't really know him that well. A group of us had an off-campus event to attend together, so I got a ride from him after school. As it turns out, he was the most absent-minded driver ever. He drove like there were no other people or signs on the road. It was horrifying. When I finally arrived, classmates who knew him better let me know why they got other rides to the event. Boy, I hope he never got into any accidents after high school. Story 46. This guy I know, an older gentleman, is a firefighter, a decent carpenter, and a first aid and ski instructor. He's an all-around great guy, and in almost any circumstance, very smart. He was driving up to the top of a ski hill on an ATV in the summer. It had rained recently, but not so much that it should have made it hard to get up the hill. The stupid part, on his single-person ATV, he tried to carry a second person uphill. The two of them got to a part of the pitch that was too muddy and steep to traverse together. The ATV started pitching backwards, so the driver had the passenger get off, and he drove up just past that point to a slightly more level pitch. The passenger gets back on. The gentleman releases the brake and starts accelerating, and the ATV immediately slides backwards into that same pitchy area where it had wanted to tumble backwards before. And the ATV and its riders proceed to go arse over tea kettle. The driver had to go to the hospital for having an ATV land on him, but avoided any life-threatening injury. The passenger was scraped up a bit, but somehow otherwise okay despite being sandwiched between the ground and the full weight of both the driver and the ATV. And the ATV, after tumbling a couple more times, landed on its wheels and ended up downhill at the next flat. Everyone was okay, eventually, but in hindsight, it was just sheer luck that no one was more seriously injured or even eliminate. Two people on a one-person ATV on level ground would have been safe enough, but as soon as it started rocking backwards the first time it hit a challenging slope, that should have been a sign that the weight wasn't distributed correctly for going uphill together. Story 47. My uncle made a lot of money through local business. He then committed wire fraud, and while on the run from the FBI started an anti-Walmart terrorist cult. Story 48. Wisdom and intelligence are two utterly different qualities. I've known people of normal or below normal intelligence who have navigated through life quite successfully. In the meantime, I've also know some really smart people whom I wouldn't trust with a box of kitchen matches. The best example I can think of was the son of my parents' best friends. This kid, as my mother liked to tell me all the time, had an IQ off the charts. Mind you, I was no slouch, but I was an A-B student, while Robert was an A student. But he was also just kind of a dullard, not the kind of person I'd want to spend time with, or anyone for that matter. My mother would literally ask me all the time, "Why can't you make the grades Robert does?" Blah, blah, blah-bitty blah. Because, Mom, I'm enjoying high school and having friends and dates and a life. And while I earned a scholarship to a good liberal arts college, Robert got into Princeton. My mother was practically fetishizing Robert going to Princeton. Every single time I was home, I'd hear about Robert this and Robert that, how he was going to win a Nobel Prize, etc., etc. Except that Robert earned his degree in secondary education. Mind you, school teaching is a noble profession. But if you're going to burn through a couple of $100,000 of your parents' money at an Ivy League school, that's not the degree you really want to get. Robert graduates summa cum 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 and gets a job in some inner-city school and quits after a week on the job. Literally couldn't handle it. His next move is to migrate to New Mexico, where he becomes a shepherd. A freaking shepherd, a job that doesn't even require a high school diploma. And he still is a shepherd to this day, unless he's gone all Unabomber and is scrawling out manifestos and posting them on telephone poles around whatever backwoods town he lives in. My mother doesn't compare me to Robert anymore. Oh yeah, I almost forgot my brother-in-law. Smart guy, an engineer, who makes absolutely catastrophic life choices. Had a weekend special with a girl and got her pregnant. Met a different girl who had literally been thrown out of her house by her husband for cheating that very day and let her move in with him. Married her for long enough for him to pay off her credit cards, then cheated on him and gave him herpes. She left him for a doctor. And yet the guy says he'd still take her back 20 years later, and I'm just getting warmed up with him. Story 49. I saw this a very long time ago. A semi became wedged under a low tunnel. The semi refused to budge when they tried to tow it out, and the cops and tow truck driver were scratching their heads as what to do. A kid on a bike came along and said, "Why not let some air out of the tires?" Of course that was the answer. Story 50. One of my best friends at school was seriously clever, like 5 A's at A-level back in the day clever. And when she was taking driving lessons, the instructor said to drive over the roundabout, i.e. to the opposite exit. She actually began to drive over the roundabout. Story 51. My best friend in high school had a little brother that scored 1550 or something ridiculous like that on his SATs. His parents were ecstatic when he told them, but their joy turned into disbelief when he said, "Yeah, it would have been a lot easier if I would have remembered to bring a calculator." So they made him retake the test with a calculator, and he aced it. The world was his oyster at that point. He was contacted by a bunch of Ivy League schools and offered full scholarships to several. He debated what to do, but in the end he chose rather poorly. He chose to go to the local community college so he could stay with his girlfriend. Story 52. My mom has an incredible sense of street stupidity. She told people on the DC Metro that we were tourists and were wandering around somewhat lost while we looked for monuments. I almost choked her. Edit. I don't want it to seem like I'm calling my mom stupid. Remember, this is a smart person does something dumb moment. She is incredibly keen on most things and my go-to for advice. Love you, Mom. Story 53. I'm seeing it now. I don't want this to sound like I am disparaging a bunch of displaced people, but one of the people I know well is incredibly smart. When it comes to computer engineering, so far there is nothing he hasn't been able to solve. He is very well educated and one of those typical types that lives simply and only has a vague understanding of money. He really doesn't spend a lot of his earnings, lives with his parents, and doesn't really have any major overheads, apart from when he builds himself a new PC or whatnot. He told us one day that he has around $600K in the bank just through unspent earnings like it was no thing. He had no idea he could buy a whole house with just his savings. No idea what we were talking about. Well, as it turns out, he has recently been dating a Ukrainian girl over the internet. They have exchanged pictures, and she does look amazingly cute. Almost too good looking. Without being a git, I would say in a perfect world this girl is a touch out of his league. Well, he popped the question over Xmas to her, and she said, yes. They have never met physically. as far as I can understand, not even video called. We are wondering if this is a girl looking to be able to emigrate here via marriage, or if this is some sort of scam run by some blokes who have other ideas. Why did he mention he had 600K to us? Well, glad you asked. It was 650K. Yep, in the last 6 months while they have been dating, he sent her 50K or so over the various expenses and other things she's had to get through. And he's about to wire her 10K to pay for a wedding dress and flights over. Now don't get me wrong, if this is a girl trapped in a war-torn country, she's likely trying to get out alive and, well, I'm sure most people would do anything they can when faced with the horribleness that's going on in the Ukraine. That's about as politically as I would comment on it. But given he has only gotten pictures, apparently some of them a little risque, some of them look really well staged. None of these things look like they were taken on a mobile phone. Unless, of course, this girl has access to a photo studio and can edit photos like a boss. Who knows? But there were also certain things that made me wonder too. Whenever he would talk about his nerdy stuff, mainly board and card games, she made out like she understood. But to me, it didn't seem to be more than something you could look up online and fake a knowledge on. Well, look, you know and I know that there is some sort of scam afoot. He's off today to start making arrangements at a registry office to be married. I have no idea where this will end up. We have told him our concerns. He's taken them on board, but seems hell-bent on proceeding. What can you do? One of the smartest guys I know, and I think he's getting duped proper and royally. I don't know the parents to ask their thoughts on it, so that's not an avenue. And to admit, I am his boss. Legally, there is only so much I can say before I get myself in hot water too, from a HR point of view. Story 54. Well, watching Elon Musk overpay for Twitter was pretty stupid. It doesn't seem to be working good for him either so far. Story 55. This guy, who was literally a renowned brain surgeon and written a few books, seemed like a genius at first, but over time I heard more and more odd takes. The Holocaust happened because of gun control. If the Jews had guns, Hitler wouldn't have risen to power. This is a guy that has done surgeries to pull bullets out of people. But speaking of guns, he did not see why active shooters were such a threat. They could be dealt with by a group of people rushing them. Prison turns people gay. Straight people go to prison and come out gay. In 2015, he was concerned that Obama would declare martial law and cancel the 2016 election. Lots of things are like slavery. Abortion is like slavery because the mother is controlling the fetus's body. Obamacare is a form of slavery and a ploy for the government to control your body. This person is Black BTW. So yeah, those are just some of the odd views of Ben Carson. Answer. Speaking of guns, he did not see why active shooters were such a threat. They could be dealt with by a group of people rushing them. He's technically right about that, from a purely numbers perspective. Like those zombie movies where there are just too many zombies coming too fast. A lot of people would die that way though, which is why it's not an optimal or even a good solution. Honestly, that's what cops are supposed to do, even if not legally required to. Sounds shoot, but I'd gladly trade one armored cop from a squad of like 5 in the ICU for a half dozen students and teachers. Story 56. In college, a friend had a 4.0 and was set to get her bachelor's in 2 years. Insanely smart. We're driving around on night, and I joke with our mutual friend driving and said, "Ooh, adult novelty store, let's stop in and browse a bit." To which the genius friend responded, "Ugh, I dislike books still cracks me up every time I think about it." Story 57. 31 YM. I did some time in prison a while back, and as you can imagine, you get all walks of life. A guy I used to play chess and share the paper with was a college professor on the outside. Smart guy. He decides he wants to clean the big industrial fan in the dorm. Solid iron warehouse job, you know what I mean. So he goes and takes it in the shower to clean it. Unplugged, walks it back out to its mount soaking wet, dripping, plugs it in, and yanks the cord. I was so stunned he was even doing it, I half thought it was some prank or something. But no, that little jig he did was the real deal. Story 58. Most PhD candidates I've met are great at the book stuff, bad at the life stuff, like not knowing how to use a can opener while making strides in microbiology. Story 59. I had a friend with double degrees, one in computer science and one in engineering. One day I opened the fridge and he was standing there and he said, "Where does yogurt come from?" He genuinely had no clue. Story 60. This may be more UK-centric, but my best friend who is a qualified doctor had no idea who Madeleine McCann was until years after her disappearance, because she never reads the news. She just thought she was a random cute kid. She still never reads or watches the news. Story 61. Watched my uncle, who was a mathematics professor at a UK university and a fellow of the Royal Society, try to walk through a closed patio door. Story 62. Oh, I have another one. This is one of my favorites. Okay, so my SIL and her live in BF. He's a lawyer and she's like a high up at a company making lots and lots of money. They get into their vehicle one day. A check engine light comes on. So they immediately get out and call a cab because the engine is broken. Answer: I'm willing to bet that your in-laws and SIL's BF's parents all have white-collar jobs. Same with my friend's ex-boyfriend. She'd want to do easy DIY stuff in their house, but his parents were doctors, so he called service people for everything. He'd literally pay an electrician to come over and reset a circuit breaker because he didn't even know how to start investigating the problem of why the power was out in a section of the house after he vacuumed while running the microwave. Story 63. Not exactly what you asked, but Elon Musk is an incredibly stupid person that had the world fooled into thinking he was a smart person for a very long time. Story 64. My former college biology teacher at a biotech college is unbelievably smart, works with molecular diagnosis of HPV, is brilliant at genetics, an awesome teacher, has been involved in some research projects, and also casually writes mirrored without even looking. She struggled for up to 30 minutes trying to get the projector to work. That happened every day. Sometimes she even gave up and used the board despite the fact she can't draw to save her life. I haven't heard from her in a few years. I hope she's okay and still fighting God with an HDMI cable. Story 65. Actually, I have to think that Vladimir Putin is fairly smart. Smart and moral have nothing whatsoever to do with each other. So the gobsmacking obtuseness with which he has conducted affairs for the past year does quite stagger me. Story 66. I had a coworker with multiple degrees ask if I liked The Big Bang Theory. I said no. You don't have high enough IQ to enjoy this show. Meanie, that show sucks, was my response. Story 67. My granddad was an officer in the U.S. Army, and by all means a fairly intelligent person with 5 separate engineering degrees, 3 being masters in various applications. One of his final assignments while in the Army was to oversee research in nuclear weapons development. He wasn't directly involved in the process, but more or less was the Army's eyes and ears for meetings, and was the one who would have to explain to the higher-ups at the Pentagon what was going on. By his own admission, he was often the dumbest person in the room. That being said, he was very serious on how many stupid ideas were being thrown around in nuclear weapons development at the time. As he described, the Wild West included an artillery shell that had a blast radius that was further than the range of the shell. Stuff like the Demon Core didn't seem to faze him since many of the scientists he had assigned to him lacked basic common sense or awareness of the consequences if their experiments went wrong. And before anyone asks, this wasn't the Davy Crockett. Another idea he said was stupid, and to the best of his knowledge, the program never amounted to anything due to limitations in the technology they had at the time. Story 68. My grandfather thinks technology is less intrusive than it was when he knew about some projects in the Air Force. He thinks the pieces don't work because they can't. This man taught me how to jury-rig parts together, how to build computers, when that "don't use this piece from this company with this piece from this other company" began. He taught me how to computer in the first place. He also gets the worst computer viruses and malware, or at least takes it to someone who runs a disk that gets rid of crap it shouldn't and fails to get rid of what it should. Oh, and pokes holes in essential programs. So at the very least, some idiot is using an outdated disk and not updating their chute, or is using one meant to be used on a different code language, or some weird chute. I don't know. Computers get specific as hell when you mess with that stuff, so stuff you don't think matters can matter a lot. It's all connected. Anyway, his trust in current chute and in whatever idiot he keeps taking his PCs to is absolute idiocy. My grandfather is not an idiot. He's normally intelligent. Trouble accepting reality with some things, and denial to heck and back, but intelligent as hell. He was even tested and had a higher IQ. He can still out-sniper trained snipers at the range, etc. So talented too, even with glasses and being in his freaking 80s. What I'm saying is, he's not the person you expect to make such stupid decisions and keep doing said stupid decisions, even when told what is going on and that he should find someone else to fix it. I even begged him to bring stuff to me next time he needed it fixed. It was so painfully bad I told him, even if just for him, I'd fix it for free if it meant he wasn't taking it to whatever idiot kept using that darn disc. The number of times I've combed through the stuff they not only didn't fix, but outright broke while not fixing is insane. He just called me ungrateful because when they were like that, he gave them to me. You know, the fix and it's yours stuff. Like not ungrateful, just stop taking it, to the person breaking your chute while pretending to fix it. At that point, you are paying money to have someone break your stuff when you take it to get it looked at. Oh, and I didn't notice anything from my childhood abuse. I don't know anything when his wife was hell on earth only goes so far. He's an incredibly intelligent and talented person. Sometimes he just digs his head in the proverbial sand, and in those moments does something incredibly dumb. Story 69. I know a young woman who graduated with a handful of scholarships on her way to become a doctor, with the bulk of the expenses paid. She never did get the hang of filling her car with gas, though, no matter how many times she was shown. Story 70. My brother's wife, a teacher, very smart, well-educated, saw a sign saying, "No engine braking in town," and asked how semi-trucks could control where they have a breakdown, and why consumer cars can't do that. To her credit, if you don't know about a Jake brake engine braking, you don't know. You aren't born knowing diesel mechanics. But she should have probably recognized the difference in spelling between braking and braking. Story 71. So I'm pretty smart. I'm in several advanced classes and whatnot. One time when my family was traveling for a road trip at night and the moon was very bright and had an orange hue to it, I didn't realize that it was the moon. So I asked my family, "What is that big orange glowy thing in the sky?" They all burst out laughing and said that was the moon. Let's just say now my family won't let me live it down that I asked that. Answer. That reminds me of one time my brain totally misinterpreted something. I live in a place that's very flat with absolutely no hills. Driving along the interstate farther north than I normally go, I spot something weird. My brain's first thought was that the Earth was curving up into the sky like on a ring-shaped space station. It wasn't. It was part of a landfill. So basically a large artificial hill that was oddly squared off. Took me a few seconds to comprehend what I was seeing. Story 72. A friend of mine is single, has pissed off his own family so much that they're done with him, so no safety net at all, and has used up all of my goodwill and got into a fist fight at work. At 45 years old, lost his job again and isn't going to be sleeping on my couch a third time. Story 73. My friend in school was very tech savvy and was so certain he knew how to temporarily disable the school's child lock software so we could play games on school computers without anyone knowing. What we didn't expect is he downloaded an exe file off the internet from home, downloaded it to a pen drive, and brought it to school and accidentally unleashed a Trojan virus on the entire system. Dude got suspended for 2 weeks and we couldn't get any work done for weeks afterwards, whilst tech support tried to fix the problem. LOL. Story 74. The problem with some smart people is the lack of common sense and/or street smarts. But anybody who specializes in one very specific thing is going to have issues with stuff that isn't that. Story 75. I'll out myself here. I'm pretty smart. 1540 on the SAT, 34 on the ACT. Graduated valedictorian in high school. Graduated cum laude with a degree in aerospace engineering from college. A couple years ago, my sump pump quit working. I figured out it was a bad float switch. So I bought a new float switch, took it apart, replaced the switch, put it back together, plugged it in and tested it by raising the float manually. Everything worked fine. So I stick it back down in the sump hole to start reconnecting it. What I failed to do was unplug it before I stuck it back in the sump hole. So the float switch immediately tripped and it started pumping a stream of dirty, rusty water right in my face and all over my utility room. After I got it shut off, I sat there for a second, blinking water out of my eyes and audibly said, "Molten Dragon, you dumbass," to myself. Story 76. Me. I supposedly have an IQ of 165 and have a degree in electrical engineering, but I can't understand football or beat anyone at chess. Story 77. My brother is a super smart guy who is studying physics in a world top 15 university. He was supposed to be spending a year in Texas when COVID was starting to cool down and travel was relaxing. He never got to go due to visa issues. I can remember a conversation we had while we were under the impression that he was going to Texas, and I had said something to the effect of, "Be careful when you get there since they don't really believe in COVID and are still hosting big sporting events at the uni he was supposed to be going to." He turns around, looks me in the eyes and said, "There's not any COVID in Texas, hence why they don't wear masks." Turns out, he genuinely didn't realize people are as self-centered as they are. And he thought, since they didn't wear masks, there couldn't be any COVID in Texas, as he'd assumed they'd be smart enough to wear them. Story 78. That time when Walt, the smartest guy Hank ever met, was too stupid to see Jack made up his mind 10 minutes ago. Story 79. Doctors who won't even try to figure out a difficult-to-diagnose condition. TMJ took me years to get diagnosed. Shouldn't have. Story 80. A guy I worked with when I was 18 or 19 asked me once, in all seriousness, how will I know what I have to change my name to when I get married? Story 81. My father was an aeronautical engineer, but whenever we built something, he would use the cheapest bolts of the softest metal and wonder why that ever it was broke. It's not like he didn't know what a FG grade 8 bolt was. Story 82. This is pretty recent. My friend lives in Cincinnati, and mid-December they came down with the flu. They are huge Cincinnati Bengals and Tampa Bay Buccaneers fans. My friend decided, despite being sick, to still go to the airport, get on a plane, and fly to Tampa. They partied for a week. They then got back on a plane and flew home to Cincinnati. Over the next 10-ish days, they posted pictures of themselves at different bars with comments saying, "Don't know why I'm still sick. Guess I will have to drink through it." Or, "Man, can't shake getting sick. Anyone want to do a shot with me?" One of the most baffling things I've ever witnessed from this person. Could they really not connect the dots that unnecessary traveling and copious amounts of adult beverage consumption might make you more sick? Story 83. During my time in college, I knew a guy who was pretty smart and creative, and since we were doing games, animation, and VFX, it was pretty handy. We had a bit of a friendly rivalry with our work, and we always got our work done early, so we would normally go around and offer to help people with their work, grab supplies, help with filming, and work on VFX with them. One time we talked about making sure our work was completed and ready to hand in. He explained he did it and is enjoying his free time just relaxing. We go to see the other students to help them, and while I get stuck in helping people with stop-motion animation, he just stands in the doorway, looks at everyone in the class and proclaims, if they can't do the work by themselves, maybe they shouldn't be doing the course, and he walks off. Dude ended up failing the module, and everyone else passed, and due to having to play catch-up for the year due to this, he had to resit a year of the work. I don't feel bad. The dude was a massive douche in general after this. Listen up, kids. The moment you think you're the smartest in the room is the moment you're the dumbest for underestimating everyone else and overestimating yourself. Story 84. I saw Thomas Lane, former president of the American Chemical Society, an avid hobby photographer, search wildly for a pen cap that he was holding. Story 85. I have a family member who is very educated in math and has taught it at multiple levels, including color, for years. They, however, have a difficult time managing money, their checkbook. They've bounced more checks than I can begin to count and racked up multiple overdraft charges, etc. It wasn't due to laziness or apathy either. They seem to make the stupidest mistakes with adding and deducting things in their accounts. I don't get it. Story 86. My mobile phone fell out of my pocket as I got into my car at the post office. Thankfully, someone picked it up, took it into the post office, and posted on the town's community Facebook page that it was there. I had my car rego papers in the phone cover so they knew whose phone it was. My sister-in-law saw the Facebook post and rang my mobile phone to tell me my mobile phone had been found. It's gonna take a while to live that one down. Story 87. I was a newspaper reporter back in the day and traveled with a photographer to cover a motorcycle race. She took many pictures until I marveled at how she never seemed to have to put in a new roll of film. Spoiler alert, camera was empty. Story 88. My grandpa was one of the smartest person I knew. At his last years, he was a math teacher in school, but he also had a degree in thermodynamics, electrology, and was an engineer as well. He designed the electrical system in our local airport, and before that he worked in the weapon industry. That guy was the most stubborn person I knew. He had an injury in his foot that he didn't say to anyone, until he couldn't walk properly and we figured out. I forced him to see a doctor, and that injury, alongside with being diabetic, which means his blood vessels were at bad condition, cost him his leg and eventually his life because he gave up. Smartest person I knew, died of stubbornness. Story 89. My first job, my boss had worked in kitchens for years, knew plenty, still managed to blow up a microwave by putting metal in it because he was insistent it wasn't a microwave. It's an industrial oven. Story 90. Professors, PhD-level students, master's students, and GTAs continuously forgetting to pick up their darn keys before leaving their offices and locking themselves out. The smarter you become, the dumber you get. Story 91. That's a tough one. The best example I can think of is when I met a very smart person who was so focused on getting the perfect grade that they ended up compromising their health. They stayed up late studying and pushing themselves to the point of exhaustion. In the end, the grade they received wasn't worth the toll it took on their health. Story 92. My dad has a PhD in computer engineering and was a lieutenant colonel in the Air Force. My mom put him on a low-carb, low-sugar diet. The first question he asked was, could he still eat muffins for breakfast? My mom said no, those definitely have carbs and sugar. My dad sat quietly for a moment before asking if he could have donuts. No, Dad, you cannot. Story 93. I had a fairly intelligent coworker suggest I get an app to be able to monitor the temperature inside the building. Couldn't understand when I explained there is mercury in my phone. Story 94. The overall collective intelligence in the room is debatable, but watching the goings-on in the U.S. House of Representatives the past 48 hours is a pretty good example, IMO. Story 95. My best friend had a 95 average in high school, took advanced courses and graduated with honors. I've seen her straight up walk into doors while looking at them, try to lick frozen poles, just forget what we were talking about in the middle of a conversation, straight up argue that the sky was overcast clouds when it was a crystal clear night and we could see the stars. Trying to convince us setting the oven as high as it could go would just mean her pizza would cook faster. Yes, it was somehow both burnt and undercooked. Story 96. When I hint to my boyfriend I want to have intimacy, and he says what? He's the smartest person I know and has had so many high grades in everything he does. He's intellectually smart, but has zero common sense and zero knowledge when it comes to physical interaction and hints. Story 97. Friend I went to high school with years and years ago. He has his PhD in physics and spent time working at the CERN Hadron Collider in Switzerland. Despite all of this, he votes Republican every time. He has even bought into everything about Trump and stealing the election. I wouldn't be surprised if he has even bought into the QAnon conspiracies as well. I can't help but just frown and shake my head every time I see him post some right-wing garbage on Facebook. How can someone so freaking smart be so freaking stupid? Story 98. Okay, so there's a stereotype that says that highly intelligent people struggle a lot with feelings. Sometimes it's true, sometimes it's not. But if we follow that stereotype, I think that smart people can be really dumb when it comes to friendships, romantic relationships, etc. Story 99. My brother studies mathematics at Cambridge University. When he was 15, he was fapping and accidentally retracted his foreskin past the head of his pepe for the first time. He was so panicked and didn't know what to do, and so he went to the hospital, ER, and a male doctor had to pull his foreskin back over his pepe. Story 100. I don't remember the exact score. It was literally 20 years ago, but the guidance counselor called me into his office and said, if I didn't administer this test myself, I wouldn't believe this. You scored higher than everyone in school. You got done so fast I thought you just marked answers and you were going to fail. You have got to be the dumbest smart kid I have ever met. You could get into any college in the country with a score like this. You literally could graduate with a D average because they know kids like you are bored in public education. I ended up dropping out a few months later. I regret everything in life. Story 101. Yesterday, I asked my friend which industry will survive catastrophic climate change, meat production, or soy and sweeteners. Then I asked him what the game was called with the music and the chairs. Story 102. My brother and my dad are both intelligent. I've seen results from an IQ test my dad took when he was younger. He's legitimately close to 140, but they're falling for political misdisinformation hard. Just today, I got to hear about how a doctor came out and said they gave Damar Hamlin a COVID booster shot last week. Like, how fudge gullible can you be, JFC? Story 103. I'm either incredibly smart or my family is incredibly stupid. They call me for literally everything tech-wise, even if it's the most easiest thing to fix. For example, there was a window open on the TV which they didn't know how to close. Called me over to fix it. I took the remote control and selected cancel, which was the only button on the screen, by the way. Problem fixed, and my time partied too hard. Or when my mom paid for a subscription she didn't want for like 5 months. I asked her if she tried to cancel it, and she told me no, because she doesn't know how to. Didn't even try to fix it for a minute and rather paid 5 months of useless subscriptions. I ended up doing it for her, even though she has a Mac which I never used before, and she uses it constantly. I mean, holy fudge. Why do people lack the ability to take action themselves? It's not some crazy science shoot that's super difficult to understand. Just try to fix it yourself sometimes. Answer: I get your frustration. My partner gets regular calls from their family on how to fix stuff that is fairly intuitive if you try, but also stuff that with their computer science degree, they can't advise on. Your family sounds like they're just not as IT literate as you are, which is different from being stupid. Do you work on an IT help desk by any chance? Story 104. My best friend is insanely smart, a good person, and a hard worker. I've seen him get caught up in the conservative info cycle and was pushing ivermectin on me as a COVID treatment. It's fudge sad, man. And I think that any day something's gonna happen and we won't be friends anymore. We've been friends for 25 years now. Sucks, man. Story 105. Me, because I went to a doctor after an injury and was prescribed the Sackler genocide pill OxyContin. Story 106. I have a PhD friend who is one of the smartest guys I know, watches Fox News and got sucked into it, and thinks Trump is one of the greatest presidents ever. Story 107. When George Bush Jr. recently gaffed and misspoke the invasion of Iraq for the invasion of Ukraine. Story 108. My brother, very smart engineer, conservative Trump supporter. For the last 6 or 7 years, it's been that long, has taken the bait every time and repeated every awful right-wing talking point designed to divide us all. Now, feels like there is a conspiracy out there against him, that all the women he knew won't give it the time of day anymore. No, dude, it's when you said that women should spend more time dating conservatives and less time worrying about their careers or loss of rights promised and delivered by mainstream right-wingers. You did that. Story 109. My ex-mother-in-law, she is a psychologist, ran her own clinic, has multiple PhD and master degrees. When Obama was elected president, she started hoarding gasoline and other supplies for the end of the world because he's the Antichrist. It escalated during COVID. She bought a ton of that liquid silver stuff that turned that man blue in the 90s and was trying to convince us to drink it daily to protect from COVID. Is convinced 5G is going to mind control us. In 3 years from getting the vaccine, we're all going to die, and then our dead bodies will be controlled by the Chinese via nanobots. Also, the Chinese have a secret army in Canada. At one point, she half-joked, the way you say something seriously but then realize no one is with you, so you nervously chuckle to play it off. She made a comment that the Hollywood elite and many politicians are lizard people from Venus wearing skin suits. Story 110. Not something I experienced, but a funny story I heard. There was one scientist, I think it was Einstein, that was trying to build a mathematically perfect house for his chicken and baby chicken. Thing is, he made 2 doors, one for the mother and one smaller one for the baby chick. That extra unnecessary door costed him $75. Story 111. The paraphrase quote, "Doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results, is the definition of insanity." I dislike this saying. This is an example of insanity, not a definition. One of the dumbest things ever said by one of our smartest people, in my humble opinion. And to be fair to Mr. Einstein, he was likely misquoted and misrepresented. Story 112. Ben Carson, literal brain surgeon, insisting the pyramids were hollow so that Joseph, from the Bible, could store grain. Story 113. Smart people actually lack common sense. They just go for the solution in complex things, whereas answer is just a simple thing. Smart people don't have practical knowledge or say how to apply the knowledge. Story 114. There was once a guy who was smart enough to focus on going to Mars and building electric cars. Then he got into selling flamethrowers and bought Twitter. Story 115. A doctor from a top 5 med school losing his medical license in his last year of his internship for faking a vaccination card. Story 116. I win this. Straight A student, smokes pot, brings it to high school. I had a Monster energy drink stash can, and my high jerk forgot to put the plant substance in it. Anyways, I got caught. The principal pulls the stash can out of my locker and says, "These will eliminate you," grabs my plant substance and gets me expelled. I turned out okay though, but it scares me knowing if I got caught in the US, I could have actually been punished for life. Answer. But it scares me knowing if I got caught in the US, I could have actually been punished for life. That's mostly scaremongering or highly misleading media stories, i.e., 10 years for their first ever substances offense, when it was for dealing thousands of pounds of substances across 10 states for millions of dollars. Technically true, but highly misleading. You probably wouldn't have even done jail time. Story 117. My father was a software developer for a pretty big company when the internet was becoming mainstream. Just this last year, he couldn't pop a computer open, throw a new SSD in, and migrate the OS. Story 118. 2 examples come to mind. Former Republican presidential candidate Dr. Ben Carson, an actual brain surgeon, Yale graduate, head of pediatric neurosurgery at Johns Hopkins, thinks the pyramids were built by Joseph of the Old Testament to store grain. Back when they couldn't get it to work, the team that ran the Large Hadron Collider at CERN seriously postulated that the time-traveling force was preventing it from operating because it might lead to some unforeseen world-ending event. Not that someone forgot to connect a couple of wires, not that something came loose, or in one case, a piece of bread, ripples from the future. Story 119. One of my best friend from high school is very smart, but her girlfriend is one of the worst person I have ever known in my life. Me and other friends, we dislike her, and I'm glad I never met her in person. Until this day, they are still together. Even what she did to my friend was. That's it for this video. Don't forget to support Vancher and my second channel, Vancher. See you soon.